Our next session is a fireside chat that is focused on U.S. regulators between Eleanor Terrett, co-founder of Crypto in America, and Travis Voyles of the U.S. EPA. Please put your hands together for a fireside on U.S. regulation.
A little closer. All right, Travis. Well, we're in the middle of a government shutdown, as some of you might know. Some of our panelists had to bail today, but Travis is still here because the EPA is actually still, in fact, open. So, yeah, round of applause for Travis for showing up. Woo! Travis, tell us what the EPA is doing during this shutdown. What are you guys open for business, but what's going on there?
Yeah, EPA is open for business, so glad to be here with all of y'all. Obviously, we entered a lapse of appropriations for the government last night at midnight. Each agency is in a different fiscal position, but at least from EPA, we are open and operating. We are assessing that day by day, but taking the president's direction and implementing his agenda at the EPA, just like we've done each and every day of this year. So very interested to see what congressional Democrats will do, but we're in full support of the president and the administration in looking for a clean CR. But until then, we'll use the funding we have at hand and continue to implement his agenda.
So you've had a career that spanned both state government, Capitol Hill, and now the EPA. But tell us a little bit about you. Our audience here might not be familiar with you, so tell us how you got your start and how you ended up here on this couch talking to me.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm sure you're surprised to see someone from the EPA here on this panel. My fellow other co-regulators bailed on me today, but that's all right. I'll hold it down from the federal family. So I am the Associate Deputy Administrator at the EPA, so I like to easily tell folks that basically just means the number 3. I was the acting deputy for a number of months earlier this year until our full Senate-confirmed team got in place. I've been in public service for over a decade now, working at the federal and state levels. I am no stranger to shutdowns. I worked on the Hill, on the House and Senate side. Worked in the first Trump administration, but for the past 3 years, prior to joining the second Trump administration here in January, I served as the Secretary of Natural and Historic Resources for the Commonwealth of Virginia. And yes, I am a native of Georgia, but it is not the state of Virginia, it's the Commonwealth of Virginia. But there in that role, what was that?
What brought you to Virginia?
I got recruited by the current governor, Governor Youngkin. So if you're a Virginia native, hopefully you've enjoyed the past 3.5 years under his leadership. But I really kind of got looped into a lot of the environmental Republican community and then somehow got recruited to move down to Richmond, Virginia for the past 3 years. So oversaw most of our environmental and energy regulatory programs at the state level, which is a wild, wild west of its own compared to the federal level, but really enjoyed taking kind of that federal experience that I had had for a number of years and translating it to the state level, where I actually saw, impacts of our decisions and really where you see a lot of the on-the-ground action. So coming back to DC, it's allowed me to reflect a lot on what the federal regulatory system does to that innovation at the state level and the local level. And it's really, I think, fit right in line with this administration's vision for environmental regulations.
Who does it better, state or federal?
I will consistently be of the opinion that smart state and local decision makers always make better decisions. I think that's guided a lot of our activities in this administration of if we can get out of the way, we are at the federal level. There's a few states that we disagree with, California as being one of them. But what we want to do is create the platform for state and localities to really make the right decisions for themselves while following the law, and allow the federal government and that burdensome being that it is kind of stay out of the way.
So we're at a Bitcoin conference, obviously. My first question to you is, why should Bitcoiners care about what the EPA does? And what jurisdiction, in your opinion, does the EPA have over Bitcoin?
Yep, that's probably the question that most people thought when they saw somebody from the EPA on this panel. But I will go back to the core of the current administrator of the EPA is Lee Zeldin, former congressman from New York, former governor candidate in New York as well. He entered into this role with kind of the framing of how we were going to approach this, of powering the great American comeback. He's got kind of 5 key pillars there, and I think 2 of them speak, really probably 3 of them speak directly to Bitcoin and mining. Even if you don't think about it, we are what powers your activities. So we are at one kind of key pillar, looking at building that energy dominance in America. Another is permitting and cooperative federalism, so getting out of that way, allowing that permitting process to flow, not being the hindrance there. And the last one, which is usually what I get the most questions on when I'm speaking to a typical environmental regulatory community, is making America the AI capital of the world. And so you may say, okay, what is EPA's role in that? We really are kind of threefold, looking at that baseload energy capacity and building what powers AI and powers these data center infrastructure, powers the mining activities that many of y'all are involved in, looking at what needs to happen from building out that infrastructure. So whether it's the building of actual data centers and what regulatory and permitting environments are there, all the way to the kind of support infrastructure that you may not see or feel. And that gets to much beyond just the data center environment, but it is what I've seen is pretty critical to building up that capacity to do more in this space across the country. So no matter where you're at in the country, having that capability. And then the last is just our ability to improve our internal processes by using AI and using this advanced technology to make us more efficient, make our regulatory partners more efficient, and really kind of reducing the burden that is the federal government.
So we're seeing this convergence increasingly of crypto, Bitcoin, and AI. And you mentioned data centers. I think now there's actually, in some cases, a unified use case for Bitcoin mining centers and chip centers as well. Mining chips. They go hand in hand at this point to kind of conserve the energy. Is my understanding. And obviously, I am not the most eloquent when it comes to that kind of stuff, but I'm doing my best here. Conserving, energy is sort of the name of the game here. At the end of the day, I feel like that is everybody's goal, whether you're a Bitcoin miner, whether you want to, whether you're anti-Bitcoin, right? You want to conserve energy. Do you see, a world in which there will be a unified framework for, both AI data centers and Bitcoin mining companies kind of under the same regulatory framework in the future, as the two are kind of coming closer and closer together?
Yeah, I really think that our approach in the Trump administration and at the Trump EPA is to do whatever we can from a regulatory standpoint to make it easier for the private sector to operate. So what we don't want is, from the federal perspective, us being so narrow, so targeted from a sector perspective, and stifling that innovation. So our view is that innovation can result in decreased emissions. It has over the years. Our view is that innovation can improve the technology on the ground, and that the federal government coming in from a perspective of increased regulations, increased burdens, is really going to stifle that innovation, but also prevent us from kind of going into that next generation of facilities, next generation of technology that is being utilized. So from our perspective, look, at the base level, our core mission of the EPA is protecting human health and the environment. We want to ensure that continues using our statutory authorities, but we have taken a holistic perspective across the government, whether you're talking about water resource impacts, energy impacts, air emission impacts of these facilities. We want to ensure that folks know what we are actually required to do by law. And if there is more that we are acting on, there really needs to be a discussion of what benefit that is driving for the American public, but also paired with what burdens that is presenting on our private sector. So we believe that the private sector has the ability, the innovation to kind of drive that conversation forward. So for us, we don't want to put these things in individual buckets and burden them with increased regulations, increased reporting requirements. That's going to stifle that innovation. So we've taken a number of steps here over the past few months that could be seen as targeted at data center and that infrastructure network from providing relief. But that's because what we've seen is that, especially over the past 4 years, the regulatory space has not evolved as our private sector has evolved. So, a lot of what we're doing at the Trump EPA is going to get framed as deregulatory and negative from an environmental standpoint. We really see it as catching up our regulatory atmosphere to what's happening on the ground, allowing these companies and industries to do what they do and build that infrastructure, build that capacity, build the platforms for y'all to go do and be successful, and really not be the hindrance standing in that. Obviously, there's state and local kind of regulatory schemes involved with that too. From the federal perspective, look, what is being built in the backyard of XYZ community is a local issue, and we feel like, especially my experience being in Virginia the past 3 years, data center capital of the world, I really came to EPA thinking, thank God I don't have to deal with data centers anymore. And then the administrator rolled out his 5 pillars, one being AI. So I went right back into the data center conversations. But the ability of the states and localities to make those decisions, to work with the private sector, to make those right calls on siting and what that capacity looks like, they have the better viewpoint. They have the better relationships on the ground. So from the federal perspective, we want to ensure the regulatory environment allows that to happen, and we're not the ones even preventing those conversations from happening.
So from the congressional side of things, this year we saw Senator Whitehouse and Senator Fetterman introduce the Clean Cloud Act, which is obviously a play on the Clean Air Act, that would mandate the EPA to set emission standards for data centers and crypto mining operations and impose penalties for people who do not comply. Do you believe that the EPA should require miners to report energy use and emissions like other industries that are currently required to under the Clean Air Act?
Yeah, so I would say I can't comment on legislation that's out there sitting in my position, but I would say the direction that we are taking as an administration is pretty opposite from that. At its base level, EPA requires a lot of reporting, a lot of information, a lot of data calls to the private sector. What we have found is a lot of that is not statutorily required, and a lot of it is not being put to any use. Me as and sitting in a federal regulator seat, I only want to ask you information and require information from you that then I'm going to make use of. So what we've found is a lot of the reporting around greenhouse gas emissions from many different sectors has not actually been utilized by the U.S. government, especially the EPA. So as we move forward, we've got one proposal out there right now that is actually taking down our greenhouse gas reporting program. At the end of the day, it's something that I feel very confident with, and our administration feels confident with moving forward, because if a private sector company values that, and their consumers value that, and their customers value that, that is a decision that company needs to make itself, and we trust them to handle that. Part of our permitting structures are going to do the necessary analysis to understand the impacts and emissions. But beyond that, we really shouldn't be requiring this intense amount of information that is not actually being beneficially used by the agency.
So the EPA is not after Bitcoin miners' data then?
That is not an area that I see EPA getting further involved in. I understand there's a lot of local, singular issues that have bubbled up, particularly in Pennsylvania. I'm not sure what Senator Whitehouse has against data centers and mining, but he's got a lot of grumbles if you listen to him.
I'll tell you what he said in the next question.
But I think what you're seeing, that approach to regulate for an outcome is not a general approach that the Trump administration is interested in. We're more of how do you get to the outcome through more of a cooperative relationship, more allowing for that innovation to occur in the private sector, while still fulfilling our statutory responsibilities at the end of the day. So, yes, that may mean that some activities are not going to go out and be able to get a Clean Air Act permit, whether it's from the state or the federal government. But that gets back to our core mission of protecting human health and the environment. I don't think that a certain company would move forward with that proposal at its base. I think what some on the environmental community are trying to get at is, really kind of regulating these things out of existence because they don't see the value. And the easiest way to do that is with a heavy hand on the regulatory burdens.
Mm-hmm. So Senator Whitehouse today is on the Senate Finance Committee, and they had a tax hearing this morning on crypto taxes. And he used his time to basically yell at the panelists about climate change and how they were responsible for it, and how the people making the policy and the regulations around crypto and Bitcoin should be paying attention because there's going to be retribution. And obviously there's a lot of big feelings on both sides of the argument, whether you're for Bitcoin mining or against it. There's merits to both sides of the argument, I'm sure, but you haven't said much publicly on the matter. So I'm curious to know where you fall on the side of the argument. Obviously there's things to be said for Bitcoin mining. It kind of, proponents would say that there's impacts on the environment, but there's ways that we can mitigate those. And then some people say it's the end of the world, it's terrible, like the Sheldon Whitehouses of the world. So from your perspective, from just you, or maybe the EPA, both, where do you come down on the argument?
Yeah, I would say, look, everything that we do has some sort of impact, external impact. I talked about this with a group earlier this year of just my experience in my previous role in Virginia in working with not mining operations, but more data center operations, and really kind of highlighting innovative activities, whether it's on the water consumption. These things are heavily intensive from an energy perspective and water perspective, but instead of kind of sitting in a seat and lecturing about all the bad, my approach has generally been there is good things happening highlighting and lifting up those innovative practices from whether it's like a water reuse strategy perspective or looking at kind of the suite of energy empowering options that are available to you based off of location. So getting into co-locating facilities, getting into ensuring that how you're building these facilities moving forward are done using some kind of test technologies that we're seeing. Really, that is my preferred approach in looking at this, and I really think like the general atmosphere too of approaching the conversation from a hey, let's work together to improve all the scenarios, all the different types of aspects of you building or utilizing this facility. Is more of a generally accepted approach. I think that gets you the results that you're looking for. And what I found too is a lot of these things get down to kind of these local issues. From a federal regulatory perspective, firmly against the federal government getting into those decisions. I trust that the communities and the private sector entities that are either constructing these facilities, operating these facilities, looking at this, they're in the best position to have those conversations of what is best for that community and what is best for that kind of path forward.
Mm-hmm. Something else that Senator Whitehouse touched on was, he encouraged the Bitcoin community, the crypto community, to be responsible, right? And I learned something new today, that apparently methane gas is 80% more potent than carbon dioxide. And I also learned that Bitcoin miners can harness methane gas to power their mining operations. And so I'm curious to know whether the EPA or anyone at the Trump administration is encouraging Bitcoin miners or has any plans to encourage miners to use more methane to, to get rid of those emissions or to reduce them.
Yeah, I would say across the federal family, we're heavily engaged on what siting practices look like, what operation practices look like, ensuring that the private sector community knows where opportunities are from an energy perspective, and I think all that gets to looking at unique situations, whether it's co-locating with existing facilities. Whether it's utilizing some of the technologies out there of carbon capture and storage. From a federal perspective, we are encouraging states to look at different permitting schemes at the state level, not the federal level, that are able to capture those innovative practices. The concept of cooperative federalism is that balance and relationship between the federal government and the state governments. There are plenty of times where that balance has to go back and forth, but for the most part, we are pushing states and through states, localities to set up these parameters to allow these companies to better utilize the situations at hand. So whether that's capturing their emissions and reutilizing them, whether that's using practices that result in less emissions, we're working hand in hand with them. A couple weeks ago, the administrator kind of launched our suite of AI and infrastructure, data infrastructure priorities, and he did that around around a roundtable of data center developers, data center operators, with the framing of here is our thoughts, here's what we're doing from an agency perspective to help support and free up y'all to go and do, but also listening to those operators saying, what is preventing you from operating cleaner? What is preventing you from expanding your facility and improving your technology? We want to know that. We want to be able to look at our regulatory, our permitting schemes, many of which are vastly outdated to the age of technology that we're operating in, and change those. So we've released a suite of actions, focused on data center development and infrastructure development that hopefully kind of let us take a step back. And if these companies have innovative practices that they want to deploy and test, like, we don't want to stop that. So his pitch to a number of different companies there was, if you have issues, if you have ideas, come to us, talk to us. We want to figure out what is that path to yes, and that path to the solutions that you want to get at. At the end of the day, I think the private sector is more accountable to their customers, to their stakeholders, whoever it may be. I think you've seen a federal government, especially the last 4 years, that was not accountable to the taxpayers. So, we want to bring that accountability in-house and ensure that our regulated entities know that we're not here just to say no, that we're open to discussions. We're open to, like, what do we need to do from a federal perspective to really, I don't want to say upend the regulations and permitting schemes, but really address them to, and I don't consider this a partisan thing at all, red or blue. I would never want the federal government to be in a position where we are preventing innovation from happening that will result in less emissions, that will result in economic development, anything like that. So that's general approach, and I encourage everyone here to same open door policy from our perspective of, if you have ideas, if you have issues with whether they're federal or state regulatory, we want to hear them. Ultimately, a lot of these states are implementing the federal regulations at a state level. If they're doing that wrong, we want to hear about that. If they're doing that in a restrictive way, we want to hear about that. And I think that really is the approach that we should be taking from the federal side, whether it's Congress writing the laws or us implementing the laws, to really get at some of those base concerns that others may have.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned the come in and talk approach. The industry has heard this before from the prior SEC chairman, Gary Gensler. I'm curious to know, though, how many conversations you have had, or is it a common practice for people? And I'm sure you get a lot of complaints against Bitcoin mining, against the emissions that it causes or doesn't cause, whatever that. You probably get a lot of negative calls. Do you get some positive calls too? Do you get people coming in to kind of say, hey, we want to have a meeting with you and we want to, help you kind of understand this space and push it further and help innovation and implementation?
Yeah, a lot of the actions that we have taken that are, there's some broad regulatory, policies that we're going after that impact much broader than the crypto industry and AI sector. A lot of those have implications here, but a lot of the specific actions that you've seen us take have been a result of XYZ company coming in and saying, we have this problem. There's a law on the books, there's a regulation on the books, there's guidance documents of how you have to do certain things. It's really restricting us from being able to do this or that. And we've sat down and worked with them. A lot of the times, and our career staff working on these things have been just all kind of open ears, because a lot of it, they've never heard about these issues before. We are entering into a new age of how development is happening, the technologies that are used in development. So it's a continuous improvement cycle from the federal perspective. And we're able to do some nationwide policy change based off really case examples. So, there's a large chip making manufacturing facility in a southwestern state. A change that we worked on with them in particular then was able to change into a nationwide policy change that's going to have implications almost in every single state where you see tech sectors coming in and doing some of these manufacturing facilities. So, every trip that the administrator he's on, I think he's almost close to 40 out of 50 states this year. I think he'll be the first cabinet official to hit every single state in 1 year. But we have sprinkled in throughout the U.S. Visits either to data centers, to manufacturing facilities, to industrial sites, to help him see, what we're talking about on the ground too. So when we come in for a policy discussion, when we've discussed a company and their problems, and trust me, he hears from them too, and he'll come to us. But then he is actually seeing this on the ground. He's seeing the implications of it. So from our perspective, don't think some issue is too big or too small. It could have larger implications to the whole sector or the broader economic development.
So your message is make talking to the EPA cool again.
I'm not sure we'll ever get there. We are the EPA, but I will say we have in this 9-month period for this administration, we have transformed the EPA. We are continuing to transform the EPA. We are trying to make sure that the administrator has been wearing some green hats around that says Trump EPA, and his challenge is for some of your red state or red district politicians that have rallied against the EPA for most of their career. His challenge is to eventually get a picture with them with one of these Trump EPA hats on. So we are trying to change the narrative around the EPA and seeing it more as a partner to what you are trying to achieve rather than us being that regulator in the space that's saying no. I think that's what most of America experienced, especially over the past 4 years. But we have not had something come across our plate these past 9 months that we've not been willing to discuss, consider, and talk through. Rarely do we toss things in the trash can or give an immediate no. And generally that's been the direction across the administration from my experience. EPA works with a number of our sister agencies. We're a member of the National Energy Dominance Council that the president set up. We're working on a number of initiatives with Department of Commerce, with the FTC, with U.S. Trade as well, and really talking to companies, talking to businesses, understanding what their issues are, from really reinvigorating that economic development across the U.S. And figuring out what that solution is.
Well, as we wrap up here, my final question to you is, what can Bitcoiners expect from the EPA going forward, maybe next year or so?
We are moving quicker on our deregulatory agenda than probably ever before. I am hopeful that will leave us plenty of time the next 3 years to tackle a whole new suite of issues. So I would say, our agenda is open. Help us, figure out what that should be moving forward. Obviously, we're going to continue. We're going to continue improving our permitting process. We're going to work with states to ensure that they are not the hindrance on their side as well. So with our partners in the White House, the Council for Environmental Quality is leading up a permitting technology effort, really looking at whatever parts of the operation of your business, from initial construction, development, operation, permitting, closure. We want to ensure that if there is an issue with that overall life cycle process, we're working through a solution. So you're going to continue to see that deregulatory push that's driven by the president. You're going to continue to see us doing whatever necessary to increase energy availability in this country, to power everything that you're doing, and really, my last point is help us figure out what else we need to be looking at. There's plenty of sectors that the EPA is typically not engaged with, and this is really one of them. So we want to hear from you what your problems, what your concerns are, to help us kind of frame that vision moving forward.
Awesome. Travis, you made the EPA cool again in this panel. I don't know about you guys, but thank you.
Thank you so much.